I thought my family's problems were just about money and bad luck, until I found a hidden basement, a secret tunnel, and a dark family history no one wanted to talk about. What started as a search for answers turned into a fight for survival against a secret cult tied to my bloodline. This is the story of how I uncovered the truth behind the hollow faith, the terrifying legacy of my grandfather, and a battle to break a cycle of darkness before the blood moon rises. Growing up, I always thought my family was just unlucky. Not cursed exactly, but stuck in a rut so deep it felt like we were buried alive. We weren't homeless, but we were always one step away from it. I remember Mom keeping a box of cereal under the driver's seat in our old van, just in case we had to sleep there again. The weird part? My mom used to be a nurse. Dad, an electrician. So how'd we end up living off instant noodles and getting eviction notices like clockwork? That's where the story begins, not with me, but with the quiet silence that surrounded my family. A silence so thick, it drowned out every question I ever asked. Like why we moved every 6 months. Why Mom cried in the shower every night. Why Dad disappeared for days at a time and came back smelling like gasoline and regret. I was 16 when everything really started falling apart, the year my little sister turned 10 and asked me, why don't we have a house like other people? I didn't have an answer for her. Not yet. Anyway, that winter was the coldest I can remember. Our latest rental was a rundown 2-bedroom house in a forgotten part of town, the kind of place with cracked windows and floorboards that groaned like they were warning us to leave. The landlord was a guy named Mr. Miller, who always looked like he'd just swallowed a lemon. He showed up once a month, collected rent in cash, and never fixed anything. Our furnace broke right before Christmas. Mom begged him to fix it, but he just shrugged and said, I don't do charity work. We spent 2 weeks sleeping in the living room with the oven door open for heat, bundled in every blanket we owned. Dad was gone again, one of his work trips, which usually meant a new excuse for not being around. Mom never talked about it, but I saw the way her hands shook when his name came up. And when he finally showed up on Christmas Eve, he was drunk, shouting about how he was doing the best he could. That was the night my mom finally snapped. She threw a coffee mug at him and screamed that she was tired of living like this, that we deserved better, that he had to tell the truth. But he didn't. He just left again. And the next day, Mom got a letter in the mail that made her face go pale. She didn't say a word, just stuffed it into her purse and told me we might have to move again soon. I didn't think much of it until I found the letter a week later while looking for quarters for laundry. It was from a lawyer, and it had my grandfather's name on it, a man I'd never met, never even heard about. Turns out he had passed away 3 months earlier and left us something. That night, I confronted Mom. I asked her who he was and why we'd never heard about him before. Her eyes filled with tears, and she said something I'll never forget. Because the past is better off buried, Evan. I didn't let it go. I couldn't. Not after all the years we'd lived like ghosts, scraping by while people whispered behind our backs. I wanted answers. In this letter, it was the first real crack in the wall of silence my family had built around me. Eventually, she gave in. She told me my grandfather had owned a house out in rural Pennsylvania, a big old place that had been in the family for generations. She'd grown up there. But something happened, something bad, and she left when she was just 18. Swore she'd never go back. But now it was ours. Well, technically mine. I was the next of kin. And if I wanted it, we could have it. A real house. Our house. Mom didn't want to go back, but I convinced her. I told her we didn't have anything left here anyway, that maybe this was our second chance. We packed everything we owned, which wasn't much, into the back of the van and left behind the broken windows, the angry landlord, and the life we never asked for. It took us 9 hours to get there. And when we pulled up to that old farmhouse, I swear my breath caught in my chest. It was huge. Like something out of a postcard, if the postcard had been left out in the rain for a decade. The shutters hung off their hinges, the porch steps were rotting, and vines climbed up the side like the house was being swallowed by the earth. But it was ours. For the first time in my life, I saw my little sister run through a yard barefoot, laughing. Even Mom cracked a smile. It felt like maybe, just maybe, things were about to get better. We were wrong. We'd only been there 3 days when the first strange thing happened. We were only just settling in when it started. It was little things at first, things you could brush off if you weren't paying attention. Like how the lights flickered every time someone mentioned my grandfather's name. Or how the upstairs hallway always smelled faintly of cigar smoke, even though no one in our family smoked. The strangest part? Mom refused to sleep in the master bedroom. She picked the smaller one at the back of the house and locked the door every night from the inside. When I asked her why, she just muttered, "Too many memories," and left it at that. Meanwhile, I started cleaning out the attic. I figured if we were really gonna live here, we should at least make the place livable. The attic was full of old furniture, newspapers, and boxes marked with names I didn't recognize. It felt like stepping into someone else's life. Then I found the trunk. It was shoved into the farthest corner, half covered in a moth-eaten blanket, heavy and locked with a rusted padlock. I thought about asking Mom, but something in me said not to. So I waited until she and Lily were out grocery shopping, then found Dad's old bolt cutters in the garage. Inside were photos. Hundreds of them. Some black and white, others faded color prints. All of people I didn't know, and a few I did. There was one of Mom, maybe 16 or 17, standing in front of the very same house we were living in now. She looked scared. Not pose scared, but like someone had snapped the picture when she wasn't ready. Then I found a stack of newspaper clippings, local papers, yellowed with age. Every single one talked about missing girls. From 1978 to 1992, at least 9 teenagers had vanished from the surrounding counties. Most of them were never found. The others had been discovered in the woods, buried shallow under leaves and stones. I didn't understand what this had to do with us, not yet. But one name kept popping up in the articles: Walter Hensley. My grandfather. The man who left us this house. That night, I showed Mom the clippings. She went pale again, paler than when she got the letter from the lawyer. She took the papers from me and burned them in the fireplace without a word. "We're not talking about this," she said. "It's in the past." But I couldn't leave it alone. I wanted to know what kind of man my grandfather really was and why Mom had spent her whole life running from this place. So the next morning, I walked into town. It was a quiet little place with only 2 traffic lights and a general store that doubled as a post office. Everyone there looked like they knew each other, and none of them looked happy to see me, especially when I mentioned my last name. "Hensley?" the store owner asked, raising an eyebrow. "You're from the old house up on Hollow Creek?" "Yeah," I said. "We just moved in." His eyes narrowed. "Didn't know anyone was left in that family." "What do you mean?" He didn't answer, just rang up my groceries and told me to be careful out there. The weird looks didn't stop. When I stopped by the library to see if they had any more information about the disappearances, the librarian got real quiet when I asked about the Hensley family. She pointed me toward the microfilm machine and walked away. That's when I found it. An article from 1993. The headline read, "Local girl escapes alleged captor. Sheriff drops charges due to lack of evidence." The photo was grainy, but I could make out the girl's face. And the house behind her. It was our house. And the man she accused of locking her in the basement? Walter Hensley. My grandfather. I felt like the floor dropped out from under me. I took the article home and showed it to Mom. She broke down. Finally, she told me everything. About how her father wasn't the man people thought he was. About how girls used to come to the house, girls no one ever saw again. How she had found something in the basement when she was 17. Something that made her run and never look back. She wouldn't tell me what she saw. Just that she was terrified of what I might find if I kept digging. So, of course, I dug anyway. The basement was your standard old house basement. Stone walls, low ceiling, smelled like damp earth and rust. Nothing stood out at first. Until I moved a metal shelving unit in the corner. Behind it was a narrow door. Not locked, but stuck. I had to put my shoulder into it to get it open. It led to a second basement. Smaller, darker, lined with stone and packed dirt. And in the middle of the room was a wooden chair, with iron restraints on the arms and legs. That's when I started to realize my grandfather hadn't just been accused of something. He'd done it. I stood there in that hidden room, my breath fogging in the cold air, staring at the chair like it might come to life. I didn't want to believe it. Who would? But the evidence was right in front of me, not just the chair, but the deep scratches in the stone wall beside it. Like someone had tried to claw their way out. I backed out slowly, heart pounding. I didn't tell Mom what I found. Not yet. She was already barely holding it together. Instead, I did what any dumb teenager would do. I went back down the next day, flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. I started checking the walls, the floor, tapping everything to see if there were more hidden spaces. That's when I found a loose stone tucked into the far wall. Behind it, a small tin box, rusted and wrapped in a cloth that smelled like mildew. Inside were several items: an old, cracked Polaroid of a girl tied to the same chair I'd just found, a silver necklace, and, worst of all, a thin notebook. It was full of notes in my grandfather's handwriting. Most of it was incomprehensible, strange, rambling thoughts about cleansing sin and silencing temptation. But one thing was very clear. He believed what he was doing was justified. I put the box back, closed up the wall, and ran back upstairs. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared, but because I couldn't stop thinking about something Mom had said. The past is better off buried. But how could it be? People in this town had vanished. Families had gone decades without answers. And here we were, sitting on top of it all like it was just a weird family secret. I had to do something. So I called the county sheriff's office. Didn't tell Mom. Didn't tell anyone. I just said I found something suspicious in the basement of the Hensley house. They came out the next day with 2 deputies and a detective. One of the deputies was an older guy, probably in his 60s, and I'll never forget the look on his face when he stepped into that basement. I told them, he whispered to himself. All those years ago, I told them. Turns out, he was a rookie back when the last girl escaped. Said he always believed she was telling the truth, but the sheriff at the time was close friends with my grandfather and had the whole case buried. Small-town corruption at its finest. They sealed off the second basement and called in a forensic team. For the next few days, our house was swarmed with investigators, crime scene tape, and neighbors whispering outside our gate. It was all over the local news. Cold case reopened at Hensley farmhouse. Mom didn't say a word. She just kept drinking her tea and staring out the window. But I could see something changing in her. Like maybe the ghosts she'd carried all these years were finally being let out into the light. Then the next twist hit. 3 days into the investigation, the sheriff called me and asked if I could meet them at the house. Just me. They had found something else. A tunnel. Hidden behind a false wall in the second basement, leading away from the house toward the woods. It had collapsed about 20 feet in, but from what they could tell, it had once connected to an old root cellar nearly half a mile away. That's where they found the remains. Multiple bodies. All young women. All likely buried over a span of more than a decade. And just like that, my family name, Hensley, became synonymous with horror. The media had a field day. TV vans camped outside our property, reporters sticking microphones through the gate, drones buzzing overhead. Mom stopped answering the phone. We started getting letters, some from victims' families, others from people accusing US of covering up the crimes. But the worst one? It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sentence written in red ink. Your grandfather wasn't the only one. That changed everything. The note sat on the kitchen table like a ticking bomb. Your grandfather wasn't the only one. I read it over and over, trying to make sense of it. At first, I thought maybe it was just some cruel joke, someone stirring the pot after seeing us on the news. But deep down, I felt something shift, like someone had just cracked open a door I didn't even know was there. I showed it to Mom. Her face went stiff. She stared at the note for a long time, then said in a quiet voice, I was afraid of this. Afraid of what? I asked. She hesitated, then motioned for me to sit down. What she told me next shook everything I thought I knew about our family. When I was growing up here, she said, there was always this rule. Dad said the woods were off limits after dark. He said there were people out there who didn't want to be found. I gave her a look. Like what? Cult people? She nodded slowly. He never said the word, but yeah, I remember hearing voices out there some nights. Singing, chanting. And once, when I was 13, I saw lights moving through the trees in the middle of the night. Like torches. I thought she was exaggerating, but she wasn't done. He used to meet with people. Out in the barn. Late at night. Men in suits. Sometimes women in dark coats. I only saw them a few times, but every time they came, he'd act strange for days afterward. Quiet. Jumpy. You think Grandpa was part of some group? She nodded again, but this time slower. I think he was more than just part of it. I think he might have helped run it. That thought chilled me more than the basement ever did. It made everything make sense, and nothing at all. I decided to go back through the trunk I'd found in the attic. I was sure there had to be more. Something I missed. And there was. I pulled out the Polaroids again, flipping through them slower this time. That's when I noticed something strange. In the background of a few of the photos, there were symbols, painted on the walls, carved into the wood. Circles with lines through them. Triangles with dots in the center. Always the same 2 or 3 designs. So I took pictures of them and posted them online, in some old mystery forums, hoping someone might recognize the patterns. That's when I got a message. Anonymous. No name. No profile picture. Just a plain text email. You're not safe in that house. Get out while you can. At first, I thought it was another troll. But then they sent a second message with a photo, one of the exact symbols I'd posted. Only this time, it was carved into a tree, and the caption read, This was taken in Hollow Creek, 1976. That was the year the first girl disappeared. I wanted to believe it was all just folklore, the stuff of scary stories and urban legends. But now there were too many pieces lining up. The symbols, the missing girls, the tunnel, the gatherings in the woods, and maybe worst of all, the idea that my grandfather wasn't the only monster out there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just kept staring at the woods from my bedroom window. And at 3:12 a.m., I saw it. A flicker of light. Then another. Moving slowly between the trees. Like torches. Like a procession. I grabbed my phone and crept downstairs, out the back door, heart pounding so loud I swore it would wake Mom and Lily. I followed the lights at a distance, keeping behind trees, my breath catching every time one of them paused. They weren't flashlights. They burned orange, flickering. Real torches, just like Mom said. Eventually, they stopped in a clearing. I stayed hidden behind a large oak and watched. There were at least 7 people, all dressed in black, standing in a circle. In the center was something I couldn't quite make out, until the firelight shifted just right. It was a wooden cross, with something tied to it. Someone. I took a step forward and snapped a photo, but I must have stepped on a branch, because one of them turned. Then another. And another. Suddenly, every single one of them was staring right at me. I ran. I don't even remember how I got home, but I didn't stop until I was inside, locking every door behind me. When I checked my phone, the photo was gone. Deleted. Like it never existed. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept checking my phone, over and over, hoping maybe the photo would come back, like it had just glitched or something. But it didn't. It was just gone. Wiped. And not just from my gallery. It was missing from my cloud backup too. I hadn't even known that was possible. I tried to tell myself I'd imagined the whole thing, that I'd spooked myself. But I knew better. I'd seen it. The fire, the people, the figure tied to the cross. Someone was out there. And someone had access to my phone. I wanted to tell Mom everything about the clearing, the people in the woods, the missing photo, but I couldn't. She was already fraying around the edges. Lily had started noticing it too. She kept asking why Mom stared out the window so much. Why she barely spoke. I didn't have the heart to tell her that Mom was probably reliving every nightmare she thought she'd left behind. So I did the next best thing. I went back to the library. I started looking through records again, trying to find anything I'd missed. The librarian, the same one from before, approached me after a while. She didn't say much. Just set a book down on the table beside me. No title on the cover. Just a black leather binding, old and worn. You didn't get it from me, she said quietly. I opened it up. Inside were hand-drawn maps of the area around Hollow Creek. One of them showed the tunnel under our house, not just ending at the collapsed section like the police thought, but continuing in two other directions. One to the root cellar. The other? To the church. I blinked. The church? There was only one in town, a small, white wooden building with a bell tower and a rusted iron gate. The one my mom refused to step foot in. She always said she didn't like the feeling. Now I wondered if she had a reason. I started digging into the church's history. It was built in 1912 and had the same pastor for over 30 years, a man named Father Hewitt. But here's the weird part. There were no records of him after 1995. No obituary, no retirement. Just gone. Same with several parishioners who used to volunteer there regularly. Their names stopped showing up in town documents at the same time. That couldn't be a coincidence. I decided to go check it out. The church was quiet when I got there. The front doors were locked, but I found a side entrance with a broken latch and slipped inside. Dust covered everything, like no one had cleaned in years, but the sanctuary looked like it had been used recently. The altar candles were fresh. There was no dust on the pews, and I swear I heard footsteps upstairs, even though I was alone. Then I noticed a strange door behind the pulpit, half hidden by a faded red curtain. I opened it slowly, expecting to find a supply closet or maybe a boiler room. But instead, I found stairs, leading down. Stone stairs, cold and narrow, lit by small bulbs strung along the ceiling. The air got heavier the further I went. Damp. Still. At the bottom was a small chamber, and what I saw there froze me solid. On the wall were the same symbols I'd found in my grandfather's notebook, painted in red. In the center of the room was a stone slab, stained dark. Chains hung from the ceiling. It looked more like a ritual site than anything remotely holy. And on the far wall, scratched into the stone with something sharp, were the words. The sins of the father never die, they multiply. I snapped photos this time. Lots of them. Then I got out of there as fast as I could. When I got home, I told Mom everything. I didn't care how fragile she was. I wasn't going to carry this alone anymore. She didn't look surprised. She just nodded and whispered, "It's still happening." I asked her what she meant. She looked me dead in the eye. "They're still active. The same group. They never stopped. Your grandfather just helped build the foundation. And they're not done." "What do they want?" I asked. She hesitated, then said, "You." That word hung in the air like a thunderclap. At first, I didn't understand. I thought she meant they were watching me, that maybe I'd gotten too close to the truth. But the look on her face told me it was more than that. She reached into the kitchen drawer and pulled out an envelope, thick, sealed, yellowed at the edges. She held it for a moment, then slid it across the table. "I was going to burn this," she said, "but I think it's time you knew." I opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. It was addressed to my grandfather, but it wasn't written by anyone in our family. It was signed only with the initials M.A., and dated almost 20 years before I was born. The letter talked about a bloodline agreement, something to do with legacy, obedience, and the return of the chosen. It read more like a prophecy than a contract, and my name was in it. Not in ink, but carved into the bottom corner in faded pencil. Evan, not even born yet. I looked up at Mom, my throat dry. "What is this?" She looked tired, older than I'd ever seen her. "When I left this place, I thought I was free. I ran, changed my name, started over. Met your father. But they found us. They always find us." I felt sick. "You knew they were watching us?" She nodded. "They don't care about me anymore. But you were always part of it. Your birth was marked. They think you're supposed to continue what your grandfather started." That was the moment everything shattered. My whole life, I thought we were just poor, just unlucky. But this was planned, controlled, manipulated from behind the scenes. Even Dad's sudden job trips made sense now. He hadn't just been running from responsibility. He'd been running from them. Or maybe, running with them. I asked her about the note. The one that said, "Your grandfather wasn't the only one." She flinched. "I think your father was involved. Not deeply, but enough. They offered him something. Power, maybe. Or money. But when he realized what it really was, he ran. He tried to protect us in his own broken way. And now?" I asked, "Where is he?" She shook her head. "Last I heard, he was in Indiana. But that was years ago. He could be anywhere." I stood up, pacing the kitchen. I felt like the walls were closing in. Like I was a pawn in a game I never agreed to play. That night, I couldn't stay in the house. I told Mom I needed air and took off walking. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed out. I ended up at the root cellar, the one the police had sealed off weeks ago. The yellow tape was gone. The boards had been pulled off the entrance. Someone had reopened it. I should have turned around right then, but I didn't. I grabbed a flashlight from the shed nearby, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. It was colder than I remembered. The air was still and heavy, like it hadn't moved in decades. The tunnel entrance that connected to the basement had been caved in further, but I noticed fresh footprints in the dirt. Then I saw something shining near the wall. It was a locket. I picked it up and froze. Inside was a picture of my mom, as a teenager. And on the back, engraved faintly, "My sacrifice." I dropped it. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. I spun around, flashlight shaking in my hands. No one was there. I backed out of the cellar fast, heart thudding, ear straining. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside made my skin crawl. Then around 2 a.m., the power went out. All at once, lights, heat, everything. I checked my phone. Dead. Mom's phone? Also dead. Even the wall clock had stopped ticking. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps on the front door. I crept to the window and peeked through the curtain. There was a figure standing on the porch. A tall man in a long black coat, holding a torch. He wasn't alone. Behind him, in the tree line, were at least a dozen others. Silent. Still. Just standing there, watching the house. Waiting. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. I just stood there behind the curtain, frozen, staring at the people outside our house. They didn't do anything. Didn't speak. Didn't knock again. They just stood there, torches glowing like eerie fireflies in the dark. Then, one by one, they turned and walked back into the woods. Gone. No sounds. No voices. No footsteps on the gravel. Just silence. I waited a few minutes before unlocking the door and stepping outside. The cold air hit me like a wall, but I didn't care. I needed to know they were really gone. The only trace they'd left behind was a single envelope wedged between the slats of the porch swing. My name was written on the front, just like the last one. Hand shaking, I opened it. Inside was a small piece of paper, and on it, just 6 words. He returns at the blood moon. That's it. No explanation. No signature. I had no idea what they meant until I looked it up. Turns out, a blood moon was only a few nights away. The timing couldn't be a coincidence. I went back inside and showed Mom the note. She went pale. Again. Then she grabbed Lily and started packing a bag. We're leaving, she said. Tonight. I didn't argue. We barely had time to throw clothes and food into a duffel before loading up the van. Mom wanted to head toward the city, said she had an old friend she could stay with for a while. I kissed Lily on the forehead and told her everything would be okay. She nodded sleepily and curled up in the back seat. But something inside me wouldn't let me go. Not yet. Not with so many unanswered questions. I told Mom I'd catch up, that I needed to tie up a few things. I promised to meet her in 2 days, once the heat died down. She didn't like it, but she didn't fight me either. She just hugged me longer than she ever had before and whispered, "Be careful. They don't just want your blood. They want your obedience." That line haunted me long after their taillights disappeared. I spent that night alone in the farmhouse, all the doors locked, the fireplace burning low. And at midnight, something strange happened. The clock on the wall, the one that had stopped earlier, began ticking again. Slow. Steady. Like someone had wound it by hand. That was when I knew I wasn't alone. I grabbed the crowbar I kept by the back door and moved slowly through the house, checking every window, every room. Nothing seemed out of place. Until I reached the study. The door was open. A small desk lamp was on. And sitting in the chair, like he'd never left, was my father. I didn't say anything. Neither did he. Not at first. He just looked at me like he'd been waiting a long time. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he finally asked. I nodded slowly. "The tunnels. The people. The letters. All of it." He sighed. "Then you know what's coming." I clenched the crowbar tighter. "What are they? What do they want from me?" "They want to finish what was started," he said. "A cycle that's been passed down through generations. Your grandfather was a vessel. They think you're the next one." I shook my head. "No, I'm not part of that." He stood slowly. "You don't get to decide that, Evan. They chose you before you were born. You're the last piece. The bloodline ends with you." "Good," I said. "Let it end." He looked sad. Like he pitied me. "That's not how this works." Then he stepped forward and reached into his coat. I tensed. But instead of a weapon, he pulled out a journal. Worn. Leather-bound. Just like the one in the attic. "This belonged to your grandfather," he said. "It has everything. What he did. Why he did it. And what they expect from you." I didn't want to take it. But I did. Because deep down, I knew this was the only way I'd get answers. He started walking toward the front door. "Wait," I said. "You're just leaving?" He paused in the doorway. "They'll come with or without me. But now you'll know how to fight them." And then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him, and just like that, he was gone. Again. Like a ghost that only shows up to remind you it's still haunting you. I locked the door, turned off every light in the house except for the one in the study, and sat down with the journal. The cover was cracked and stiff, the leather worn thin in places. It smelled like smoke and old paper. Inside, the handwriting was tight and slanted, almost obsessive. My grandfather had filled every inch of every page. No margins, no breaks. Like he couldn't write fast enough to keep up with what was in his head. The first few entries were ramblings. Paranoia. He wrote about watchers in the trees, blood that binds, and the prophecy of the red path. I flipped ahead. That's when things got clearer and more terrifying. Apparently, the group, the people in the woods, called themselves the Hollow Faith. They weren't just a cult. They were generational. Ancient, even. They believed in something they called the purge of flesh, a twisted idea that pain cleansed the soul and prepared the body for rebirth under the blood moon. Every generation, a child was chosen from within the line of the founders' families that had helped form the original group nearly a century ago. These chosen ones were meant to lead future awakenings. My family? We were founders. And me? I was the chosen one for this cycle. My birth had been planned. Not by chance. By them. The journal explained how my grandfather was first initiated at 13, how he was trained to resist guilt, how he took his first life by 16, and how the group believed the act unlocked clarity. They called it the binding. Once completed, the chosen would receive visions of the next phase. Instructions. Orders. They claimed it wasn't murder, but sacred cleansing. A rite of ascension. And the blood moon? That was the final step. Every 17 years, a ceremony took place, deep in the woods, where the chosen one would either accept their place as the new vessel or be sacrificed in their failure. I dropped the book like it had burned me. 17 years. I was turning 17. In 3 days. The pieces snapped together so fast it made my head spin. The lights in the woods. The envelope on the porch. The way everyone in this town looked at me like they were waiting for something. This wasn't just a creepy old cult hiding in the trees. This was a ritual. And I was at the center of it. That night, I didn't sleep. Again. I sat at the kitchen table with the crowbar in one hand and the journal in the other, waiting for sunrise. At first light, I made a plan. I packed a bag with everything I might need. Flashlight, knife, matches, water, and a burner phone I'd bought months ago and never used. I copied the most important pages of the journal, left the rest hidden in a floorboard beneath the study desk, and I went back to the church. This time, I didn't sneak. I walked straight through the front doors, down the hidden stairs, and into that stone room. And I waited. I don't know what I was expecting. Maybe to confront them. Maybe to burn it all down. But after an hour, nothing happened. Just as I turned to leave, I heard a noise behind the wall, a faint grinding, like stone on stone. Then a doorway opened in the far corner. It led into a narrow tunnel I hadn't seen before, not marked on any of the maps, not mentioned in the journal. I followed it. For almost 30 minutes, I walked, the path winding deeper and deeper underground. The air grew colder. The walls tighter. And then I emerged into a chamber, much larger than the first one, lined with candles and symbols carved into every surface. Bones arranged in patterns across the floor. And in the center, a pedestal with a bowl full of ash. A man stood at the far end. Not in a robe, not wearing a mask. Just a man in a black coat, face calm. He looked up and smiled. I was wondering when you'd come. I was wondering when you'd come. His voice was steady, calm, like he was greeting an old friend, not a kid who just stumbled into a secret underground chamber filled with bones. I stood frozen in the doorway. He stepped closer, hands out, empty, non-threatening. You've seen the signs, he said. You've read the journal. You know why you're here. I didn't answer. I was too busy calculating the distance to the door behind me. Too busy deciding if I could outrun him if I had to. I know this is overwhelming, he continued. But you were always going to end up here. You felt it, haven't you? The pull. The unrest. The way the world bends just a little differently around you. I said nothing. He walked over to the bowl of ash and ran his fingers through it like it was water. Walter resisted too. At first, he said. But eventually he accepted the truth. We're not monsters, Evan. We're protectors of balance. Shepherds. I finally found my voice. You kill people. He nodded. Not ashamed. Not angry. Just matter of fact. We cleanse. We sacrifice to preserve the harmony between what is seen and what is hidden. Without us, the world would rot from the inside out. I took a step back. He raised his hand slightly, not to stop me, just to signal calm. You can still walk away. You always have a choice. But if you leave, the burden will still follow you. You can run, like your mother, like your father. But the hollow faith doesn't forget. We wait. I clenched my fists. I'm not like him. I'm not like any of you. His smile faded. No, he said. You're not. You're stronger. You survived what your bloodline couldn't handle. That's why the blood moon rises for you. He pointed to the far wall, where a narrow staircase led upward, carved right into the rock. At the top of those stairs is the clearing. You've seen it before. You know what's coming. But now, it's your turn to choose. I looked at the stairwell, then back at him. I've already chosen, I said. And I choose to end this. He gave me a look that was half pride, half sorrow. You think ending it is as easy as walking away? He asked. You'll see soon enough. The blood remembers. I turned and left without another word, heart racing, feet barely touching the stone steps as I climbed back into daylight. When I got home, the house felt colder than before, quieter, like it knew what was coming. I called Mom. No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. Then I checked the burner phone. One message. No name. No number. Just a blurry photo of the van, parked in the woods. And a caption. She tried to run. She won't again. My hands went numb. They had her. And maybe Lily too. That night, I didn't wait. I packed what little I had left, grabbed the journal, a flashlight, and the crowbar, and headed for the woods. I followed the path I'd taken before, the one that led to the clearing. But when I got there, it was empty. No torches. No chanting. Just darkness. Until I turned around and saw a figure standing in the trees. It wasn't the man from the chamber. It was my mother. Bound. Gagged. Eyes wide with terror. And behind her, dozens of people. All in black. Torches lit. Faces blank. They surrounded me. No way out. Then a voice echoed through the trees. Let the binding begin. The words rolled through the clearing like thunder, low, heavy, final. The torchlight flickered against the trees as the figures closed in, forming a circle around me and my mother. I could hear her muffled cries behind the gag, her wrists tied tight in front of her. She was trying to warn me, trying to tell me something with her eyes. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Everything in me screamed to run, but there was nowhere left to go. From the shadows stepped the man from the underground chamber, calm as ever, like he was just hosting a Sunday sermon. He raised one hand, and the crowd went silent. Tonight, he said, the bloodline returns to its rightful place. The cycle continues. The vessel is ready. I shouted, let her go. He looked at me like I was a child throwing a tantrum. She was never meant to interfere, he said. She delayed the inevitable. But the path remains unchanged. Then he turned to the crowd and spoke a phrase I didn't recognize, something ancient sounding, chanted in unison by the rest. No flesh without fire. No fire without faith. I stepped forward, raising the crowbar in my hand. I'm not going to let you do this. The man looked at me, not angry, not surprised, just disappointed. You misunderstand, he said. You're not the sacrifice. You're the flame. Before I could react, two of the cloaked figures grabbed me from behind. I fought, thrashed, kicked, but they were strong. They dragged me to the center of the circle, forcing me to my knees. Another figure stepped out of the crowd, holding something in his hands. A dagger. Old. Rusted. Covered in symbols that matched those from the church and journal. The man knelt in front of me, holding the blade between us. This was your grandfather's, he said. He used it to anoint the flesh. Now, it's your turn. I stared at the blade, heart hammering. This isn't a ceremony, I growled. It's a death cult. He chuckled. You're not wrong. But death is the beginning. Pain is the passage. Rebirth is the reward. Then he held the dagger out toward me. Confused, I didn't take it at first. Until he said, you must choose. Shed blood, yours or hers. And that's when I realized. They weren't going to kill me. They wanted me to kill her. My own mother. Right there, in the clearing, in front of all of them. I stared at the blade, then at her. She was shaking her head violently now, tears streaming down her face, gag-soaked with panic. I felt like I couldn't breathe. The circle tightened. The man leaned in close. Do it, he whispered. Complete the binding. My hands trembled. I took the blade. They loosened their grip on me just enough. I stood, and for a second, I pretended to give in. I stepped toward her slowly, like I was hypnotized, like I was ready to go through with it. I knelt in front of her. Her eyes met mine, and in that instant, she knew. I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, close your eyes. Then I turned fast and drove the dagger into the man behind me, straight into his chest. He gasped, stumbled back, stunned, then collapsed. The circle broke. Screams. Chaos. Torches dropped. Some tried to grab me, others ran. I spun around and cut my mom free. We ran. Through the woods, over roots, past trees that all looked the same. I didn't know where we were going. I just knew we had to move. They were behind us, but not all of them. Only a few followed. The others scattered like ants. We finally burst out of the woods onto the road, panting, bloody, cold. That's when I saw headlights. A car. And standing in front of it, holding Lily in his arms, was my dad. My heart nearly stopped when I saw him. Dad. Holding Lily. Alive. Safe. For a moment, everything else faded. The cult, the blood moon, the terror in the woods. He looked tired. Older than I remembered. But there was a fire in his eyes. Get in the car, he said urgently. We don't have much time. Mom and I didn't hesitate. As we piled into the back seat, I asked, where have you been? Why did you leave us? He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. I was trying to find a way out. A way to stop them. Stop them, I repeated, still catching my breath. He nodded. I was recruited too. They wanted me to be the vessel. I said no. They didn't take rejection lightly. He paused. Lily and your mom, they're safer with me. For now. But how? I asked. How did you find us? He smiled sadly. You left a trail? The journals, the messages, the notes. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Then his voice dropped. But it's not over. Not by a long shot. He explained that there was a faction within the Hollow Faith, some who believed in ending the cycle, and others who wanted it to continue no matter the cost. We're part of the resistance, he said. We've been fighting from the inside. I looked at him, struggling to process everything. Then what now? He took a deep breath. We fight. Together. And just like that, my world shifted. No longer was I a scared kid caught in a family nightmare. I was part of a war. Against a secret society that had haunted my bloodline for generations. Against a darkness that thrived on fear and pain. Against a fate I was determined to break. As we drove away from the woods, toward the unknown, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Hope. We left the woods behind, the van's headlights cutting through the thick darkness like a beacon. For the first time in months, I felt something close to freedom. Dad drove without speaking much, his hands tied on the wheel. Mom sat beside me, her eyes still haunted but calmer. Lily curled up in the back, exhausted but safe. We didn't know where we were going. We only knew we had to stay ahead of them. The Hollow Faith wasn't just some local nightmare anymore. It was bigger, older, more dangerous. But we had something they didn't. Each other. And a secret, one hidden deep in the journal Dad handed me before we left. The last page held a map. Not of tunnels or secret rooms, but of people. Names. Allies. Those who wanted to end the cycle, not continue it. We weren't alone. The fight was just beginning. I don't know what the future holds, if the blood moon will bring an end or a new beginning. But I do know one thing. Family isn't just the blood you're born with. It's the people you choose to stand beside, no matter how dark the night gets. Thanks for reading. If you ever find yourself fighting your own demons, remember, the darkest paths can lead to the brightest dawns.